A billionaire arrived home early to his luxury estate and was absolutely shocked by what he found. His $3,000 Italian leather briefcase hit the marble foyer with a heavy thud, but the sound was instantly swallowed up. A burst of pure, childish laughter rang out like a bell through the massive, silent hall. Ethan froze. After an 18-hour flight and a high-stakes merger that would have broken lesser men, his brain couldn't compute this. This wasn't the tomb-like silence that usually greeted him. It wasn't the stiff, formal presence of Gertrude, the housekeeper, waiting to take his coat. It was life. Messy, loud, chaotic life, exploding right in the center of his minimalist living room. Right in front of him, covering the pristine Persian rug, the one strictly off-limits to shoes, stood something impossible. A massive pillow fort built from his own Egyptian cotton sheets and the velvet cushions from the main sofa. Golden afternoon light poured in through the windows, catching the white fabric. It made the fortress glow like a warm, magical cocoon against the gray coldness of the rest of the mansion. Ethan blinked, his mind reeling. His first instinct, honed by years of iron discipline, was irritation. Who authorized this mess? Where was the order? Then a chubby little hand in red pajamas shot out from the cushions, followed by a laugh that hit him like a physical blow to the chest. "Gotcha!" a soft female voice shouted, vibrating with playful energy. Ethan stalked forward silently, moving like a predator in his own territory. What he saw through the gap in the sheets stopped him dead. It was Lucia. The 23-year-old nanny the agency sent a month ago was on her hands and knees inside the fort. She wasn't wearing the stiff, starched uniform the previous nannies wore, just a simple navy dress. Her blonde hair, usually pulled back in a tight bun, was falling loose in soft waves around her face. And on her hands, she was wearing those ridiculous yellow rubber cleaning gloves. But she wasn't scrubbing toilets. She was being a tickle monster to his 3 children, Noah, Liam, and Emma. His triplets, who usually looked at him with fear, were piled on top of her, laughing until they turned purple. Lucia growled playfully, wiggling her gloved fingers like harmless claws. And the kids, his heirs, the future owners of a massive empire, were squirming with absolute joy. Ethan felt a lump in his throat so tight he had to loosen his silk tie. The house hadn't sounded like this in 3 years, not since the funeral. For 3 years, he'd focused on providing and protecting, but he'd forgotten how to just love them. Watching this humble girl in cheap rubber gloves crawling on the floor gave his kids the warmth his millions never could. It was a direct hit to his ego and his heart. She had no idea he was watching. Nobody did. He'd arrived 4 hours early to surprise them, but he was the one getting the shock. Hit that subscribe button to find out how this simple game started a war inside the mansion and changed this family forever. You do not want to miss what Ethan does next. Ethan should have cleared his throat. He should have demanded order immediately. That was the protocol. Gertrude always preached that kids needed structure, not chaos, but his feet felt like lead. He leaned against the doorframe, hidden by the hallway shadows, watching a happiness he didn't understand like an outsider. "The yellow monster is gonna eat you," Lucia cried out, grabbing Emma and blowing raspberries on her tummy. Emma squealed with delight, grabbing Lucia's ears with her tiny hands. "No, Lucia," Liam shouted, jumping onto the nanny's back to save his sister. Lucia flopped onto the pillows, dramatically defeated by the tiny warrior, and all 3 kids tackled her in a group hug. The scene was so perfect, so painfully domestic. Ethan felt like he was intruding on something sacred. For a split second, his vision blurred. He almost saw his late wife, Elena, instead of the nanny. But Elena never played on the floor. Elena was perfect, elegant, untouchable. Lucia was real. She was right there, filling the massive void of that house with nothing but her presence and a pair of cleaning gloves. The grandfather clock in the foyer struck 5 in the afternoon. The metallic chime shattered the spell. Ethan knew he couldn't hide in the shadows forever. He had to go in. He had to pop that magic bubble and go back to being the dad, the owner, the boss. But he wasn't afraid of the maid breaking the rules. He was terrified that the moment he walked in, the laughter would die. And he was right to be scared. Ethan stepped out of the dark, and the click of his hard-soled shoes on the marble echoed like a gunshot in the quiet hall. The effect was instant and devastating. Liam, standing on a cushion celebrating his victory over a monster, froze and looked up, his big dark eyes locked onto his father's imposing figure, silhouetted against the hallway light. The boy's smile vanished. He slowly lowered his arms and sat down. Silence rolled through the room like a shockwave. Emma and Noah followed their brother's gaze and went still as statues. Their innocent joy was instantly replaced by that instinctive caution kids get when the big boss walks in. Lucia felt the sudden shift in the air and stopped laughing. Her survival instinct kicked in before her brain could catch up. She spun around, still on her knees, eyes wide with genuine panic as she saw the master of the house standing there, face unreadable. Black suit, flawless. Mr. Ethan, she stammered, scrambling clumsily to her feet. Those yellow gloves, which just seconds ago were magic toys, now looked ridiculous. Vulgar reminders of her place in the pecking order. She ripped them off desperately, hiding them behind her back like a murder weapon. No, we didn't expect you back so soon. I am so sorry. Lucia's heart hammered against her ribs. She needed this job. The money she sent home every month paid for her mom's meds and her little brother's tuition. She knew the rules. No mess in the common areas. Kids presentable by 5 o'clock sharp. Silence when the mister is home. She'd broken all 3 rules in a single act. She glanced at the blanket fort. It looked like a pile of garbage now amidst the mansion's luxury and felt tears of humiliation stinging her eyes. Can I explain? She asked, voice trembling, bowing her head in submission. It was raining outside. The kids were restless and I just wanted, I'll clean it all up immediately. 5 minutes, and it'll be like nothing happened. Please. Ethan didn't say a word. He just walked slowly toward the center of the room. Every step ratcheted up the tension. The triplets darted glances between their father and their nanny, sensing Lucia's fear. Noah, the sensitive one, poked his lip out and latched onto Lucia's leg, burying his face in the fabric of her dress. That gesture, that instinctive loyalty to the help instead of his own father, felt like a knife in Ethan's gut. He flashed back to the day they were born. The chaos, the beeping monitors, and the crushing news that Elena hadn't made it. He'd been left alone with 3 crying babies and a fortune that couldn't buy them a mother. He'd buried himself in work, building hotels and closing deals, leaving the parenting to high-end agencies. He thought providing the best clothes, the best food, and the safest house was enough. But seeing Noah cling to Lucia, he realized the monumental failure of his fatherhood. He stopped just 3 feet away from them. Lucia squeezed her eyes shut, waiting for the axe to fall, waiting for the screaming fit the housekeeper usually threw over a speck of dust. Whose idea was this? Ethan asked. His voice was deep, grave, but strangely missing the anger Lucia expected. Lucia opened her eyes, trembling. It was mine. Sir. Only mine. The children aren't to blame. I pulled out the sheets. I moved the cushions. I take full responsibility. Ethan looked at the fort. Then he looked at his children. Emma still had a pillow feather tangled in her curly hair. And what exactly is this supposed to be? He asked, pointing at the structure. A castle. Sir, Lucia whispered, feeling smaller by the second. A castle to protect them from dragons. The millionaire exhaled sharply through his nose, then crouched down. The move was so unexpected that Lucia reflexively took a step back. Ethan, the man who never wrinkled his suit, put a knee directly on the floor, bringing himself to eye level with his kids. He didn't look at Lucia. He looked at Liam. Is there room for one more in the castle? He asked. The silence that followed was absolute. Lucia stopped breathing. Gertrude, who had just appeared in the kitchen doorway attracted by the voices, stood petrified with a silver tray in her hands, her jaw on the floor. Ethan hit the floor as Liam looked at Lucia, waiting for the green light. Still in shock, Lucia gave a tiny nod, her eyes shining with unshed tears. The boy turned back to his father, sizing him up like a judge in a courtroom. You have to take off your shoes, Liam said, voice steady. And the tie. Knights don't wear ties in the fort. Lucia gasped. Liam, don't talk to your father like that. But Ethan was already reaching down, untying his Italian leather Oxfords. He moved with purpose, kicking the shoes aside before loosening the perfect Windsor knot of his tie and tossing it onto the sofa. Rules are rules, Ethan said, locking eyes with Lucia for the first time. There was no judgment in his gaze, just intense, almost painful curiosity. A silent admission that she had built something here he didn't even know how to start. And something else that made Lucia's cheeks burn. Gratitude. Ethan crawled into the blanket fort, dragging his $3,000 suit across the rug. Inside, he whispered a command. The triplets squealed and dove in after him. Lucia stood outside, clutching her yellow rubber gloves, feeling like the earth had just shifted beneath her feet. By the kitchen door, Gertrude watched, her expression darkening. The old housekeeper, loyal to tradition and jealous of her turf, gripped her silver tray until her knuckles turned white. This girl was crossing dangerous lines, shattering the hierarchy, and worst of all, making the boss smile. Gertrude knew the score. A nanny who becomes family is a threat to the staff. Enjoy it while you can. Little girl, she muttered, turning back toward the kitchen. Let's see what Miss Vanessa thinks when she gets here tonight. Inside the fort, Ethan felt ridiculous yet strangely free. The space was filled with the scent of fresh laundry and baby powder. Liam was rushing through an explanation of the castle's defenses. Emma climbed into his lap, touching his dress shirt in awe, while Ethan looked back toward the entrance, searching for Lucia. You too, he said, his deep voice filling the small space. The castle needs its guardian. Come in. Lucia. She hesitated, glancing toward the hallway where she knew Gertrude was lurking. But the boss's word was law, and the pleading look in the kid's eyes was impossible to resist. She ducked down and crawled inside, closing the circle. For the first time, wealth and service, father and children, were all equal under a roof of borrowed sheets. But a storm was coming. It was driving a red sports car and hated everything happening in that living room. Inside the fortress, the outside world had ceased to exist. The air was thick and warm, smelling like an intoxicating mix of fabric softener, vanilla cookies, and the sweet scent of childhood. For Ethan, used to 60-degree boardrooms and sterile 5-star hotels, the sudden heat was stifling at first, but strangely comforting. Seconds later, it felt like a sanctuary, a place where stock tickers and corporate mergers didn't exist. He sat cross-legged, a posture he hadn't held in decades, and his knee accidentally brushed against Lucia's. She shrank back instinctively, pressing herself against a wall of pillows, trying to disappear. The physical closeness was electric, forbidden. Ethan saw the slight tremor in her hands red from hard work, now resting on her lap without the yellow gloves. He noticed a tiny spot of tomato sauce on her uniform collar, an imperfect detail that somehow seemed infinitely more beautiful than the cold diamonds he saw at charity galas. "Daddy, are you the king?" Emma asked, breaking the tense silence. She handed him a jagged cardboard crown colored with gold crayon. Ethan took the fragile thing in his large hands. He looked at Lucia, searching for a guide, an instruction manual he didn't have. "Am I?" he asked, voice raspy in the tight space. Lucia looked up. Her honey-colored eyes met his, and for a moment, fear of the boss gave way to the honesty of a caregiver. "Only if you promise to protect the kingdom from sadness." "Sir," she answered softly. It wasn't a servant's reply. It was a challenge. A stand-in mother speaking to an absent father. Ethan felt the heavy truth of her words. He placed the cardboard crown on his head with more solemnity than he ever showed when signing million-dollar contracts. "I promise," he said, looking at his children. And just like that, the magic happened. The shyest one, the kid who usually hid behind the drapes when Ethan came home, crawled toward him. With shaky confidence, he placed a tiny hand on the silk tie resting on his father's chest. "Lucia says your job is fighting dragons," the boy whispered. "That's why you're never here, because there are too many dragons, and they're really strong." Ethan felt the air leave his lungs. He stared at Lucia in shock. She looked down, ashamed. "I had to explain it to them," she murmured. "I didn't want them thinking you just didn't want to be here." A painful knot formed in the billionaire's throat. For 3 years, he thought he was doing the right thing, working himself to the bone to build them an empire. But while he was building skyscrapers, this 23-year-old on minimum wage was building him up as a hero to his kids. She was single-handedly saving his relationship with them. Little white lie after little white lie. Meanwhile, he didn't even know the name of Emma's favorite doll. "Did the dragons hurt you?" Liam asked, touching an old, faint scar on Ethan's hand. "Sometimes," Ethan admitted. For the first time in years, he was honest. "Sometimes the dragons win, and I feel very alone." "You're not alone," Emma said firmly, throwing her arms around him. Her brothers followed suit, wrapped in that group hug. Inside a cave made of bed sheets, Ethan broke. He didn't sob openly. His upbringing wouldn't allow it, but his eyes welled up. He squeezed his eyes shut and buried his face in his children's hair. He breathed in their scent, felt their hearts beating against his chest, and felt Lucia watching him. It wasn't a look of judgment or submission. It was deep understanding, a human connection that ignored class barriers. She wasn't looking at the billionaire. She was looking at a wounded man who had finally come home. Time seemed to freeze. They played for 10, maybe 20 minutes. Ethan learned that Noah's teddy bear was named General Whiskers and held high military rank. He learned that Emma was terrified of thunder and that Liam wanted to be an astronaut so he could visit Mom in the stars. Lucia orchestrated it all with natural grace, translating toddler speak for the rookie dad, building invisible bridges between them. But reality, cold and rigid, was waiting just outside the sheets. The hall clock chimed the half hour like a warning bell. The sunlight was fading, bringing the evening shadows. "The sun is setting, my brave knights," Lucia announced theatrically, though her eyes betrayed the anxiety of returning to the real world. "The night dragons are sleeping, but we need to eat dinner." The mention of dinner broke the spell instantly. The kids protested in a chorus of no and 5 more minutes, clinging to Ethan's jacket like castaways on a raft. "Listen to Lucia," Ethan said. His voice wasn't the sharp bark of a CEO, but the calm authority of a father. Surprised by his gentleness, the children let go. They crawled out of the fort, one by one. The temperature drop was sudden. The living room felt colder, larger, and emptier than Ethan remembered. Stepping out of the sheets, he felt exposed, vulnerable without his armor of emotional distance. Lucia was the last one out. As she stood, she nervously smoothed her dress, slipping back into her role as the employee, hands clasped in front, head slightly bowed, avoiding his eyes. The queen of the fort was gone. The hired nanny had returned. "I'll clean this up immediately, sir," she said, crouching quickly to fold a sheet of Egyptian cotton. I'm sorry for the mess." "It won't happen again." Ethan watched her. He saw her hands shaking slightly as she tried to fold the fabric perfectly. He saw the fear in her tense shoulders. A wave of anger hit him, not at her, but at the culture of fear in his own home, at the rigidity he had imposed and the housekeeper executed with military zeal. "Leave it," Ethan said. Lucia froze, the sheet half folded. "I'm sorry, sir. I'll be quick. I promise." "I said leave it," he repeated. Taking a step toward her, Lucia dropped the fabric as if it were on fire. Stepping back with wide, terrified eyes, Ethan crouched down not to inspect the floor, but to grab the other end of the sheet she had dropped. "I'll help you," he said simply. The silence in the room was absolute. If the head housekeeper had been there to see it, she probably would have passed out cold. Ethan Blackwood, the billionaire who never lifted a finger, was on his living room floor folding sheets right next to the nanny. "Sir, please, stop. You shouldn't be doing this," Lucia whispered. She looked terrified. If anyone saw the boss doing her work, she was done for. "It was my mess, too. I was just playing," he replied without looking up, focused on lining up the corners with military precision. "And Lucia, stop shaking. I'm not going to fire you." Those 5 words hit her like a wave of relief. Lucia finally exhaled, letting go of tension she didn't know she was holding. Her shoulders dropped. They grabbed the sheet to pull it taut before the final fold. It was a perfect rhythm, an old domestic dance. And as they brought the corners together, their fingers brushed. It wasn't just a touch, it was a collision. Her warm, rough skin against his cool, smooth hand. A spark of real, physical electricity snapped between them. They jerked their hands back like they'd touched a live wire, eyes locking instantly. The massive wealth gap, the elite background, the status. It all just vanished. Just a man and a woman, breathing hard in the dim light, connected by the 3 kids watching them from the couch. Ethan felt a heat creeping up his neck that had nothing to do with the thermostat. He saw the deep blush on Lucia's cheeks. He saw her pupils blow wide open. There was an innocence about her, a purity that clashed violently with the calculating, polished women in his usual circle. Vanessa, his fiancée, was a cold statue. Lucia was a warm hearth. "Thank you," she rasped, "for playing with them. I've never seen them this happy." "No, thank you," Ethan replied, his voice dropping to a dangerous, intimate rumble. "For teaching me how to be a dad." They were standing way too close. The air was buzzing. Ethan felt a crazy, irrational urge to reach out and tuck that stray blonde curl behind her ear. His hand twitched, moving just an inch toward her. Lucia held her breath, hypnotized, rooted to the spot. Then, the spell shattered. The aggressive roar of a V8 sports car echoed from the driveway, ripping through the quiet evening. Seconds later, the sharp, commanding click of stiletto heels on marble started getting louder. Click, click, click. Every step sounded like a judge's gavel. The kids froze. The magic in the room evaporated. Lucia scrambled back 3 steps, head down, the color draining from her face. Ethan straightened up, his iron mask sliding back into place, though his heart was still hammering against his ribs. "Ethan." Vanessa's voice, shrill and sickeningly sweet, cut through the hallway before she even appeared. "Gertrude said you were home. My love, what a wonderful surprise." She walked in dressed to kill tight red dress, jewelry worth more than Lucia's childhood home, and a smile rehearsed for the paparazzi. But that crimson smile died on her lips the second she scanned the room. She saw the pillows on the floor, the kid's messy hair. She saw Ethan with no tie, sleeves rolled up, and then her predator eyes locked onto Lucia, standing inches from her fiancé, flushed and looking guilty. The silence wasn't peaceful. It was the tick-tock before a bomb goes off. Vanessa didn't need a diagram to understand what she had just walked into. Her instincts, sharpened by greed and jealousy, smelled the threat immediately. That maid wasn't just help anymore. She was a problem. And Vanessa deleted problems. What the hell is going on here? Vanessa hissed, her voice dropping to a lethal whisper, eyes shooting daggers at the nanny. War had been declared. The air turned toxic, choked by Vanessa's overpriced, suffocating perfume. It was a scent meant to be classy, but right now, it just smelled like an invasion. She stood in the doorway, scanning the scene with a twisted look of pure disgust. Her icy blue eyes flicked from the mess on the floor to the dirt on Ethan's knees, finally drilling into Lucia with laser precision. Lucia felt that stare. It hit her like a physical slap. She instinctively stepped back, shrinking into her Na'vi uniform, feeling dirty and small, an intruder in a glittering world where she didn't belong. "Can someone tell me why my future ballroom looks like a war zone?" Vanessa asked, her heels clicking sharply as she stalked toward the center of the room. Her voice was calm, but there was a razor-sharp edge to it that made the triplets shrink back on the couch. Ethan ran a hand through his messy hair, trying to pull himself together. The magic of the moment shattered instantly. "We were just playing, Vanessa," he said, sounding surprisingly defensive. "I got home early, and the kids were having fun." Vanessa let out a dry, humorless laugh. "Ethan, darling, you don't play. You run empires. You certainly don't roll around on the floor." She paused, eyeing Lucia up and down with a look of pure disgust, especially not with the help. Lucia bit her lip, fighting back tears of humiliation. "I'm so sorry, Miss Vanessa," she whispered, her voice trembling. "It was my idea. Mr. Ethan was just trying to be kind to the children. I'll clean it all up right now." Vanessa ignored her completely, as if she were a talking piece of furniture. She turned to Ethan, stepping into his space and picking invisible lint off his lapel with a possessive grip. "Honey, I get it. You feel guilty about your business trips and want to spoil the kids, but there are standards." Her voice dropped to puck. To a confidential whisper. "It's not exactly sanitary for them to be rolling around with, well, someone from her background. Who knows what kind of germs she drags in from her neighborhood." The insult hung in the air, cruel and direct. Lucia froze. It wasn't just a jab at her job. It was an attack on her dignity, on her life. Ethan stiffened visibly. He knocked Vanessa's hand away from his chest. "Watch it." "Vanessa." His voice dropped to a low growl. "Lucia keeps my children cleaner and happier than you've ever bothered to notice." Vanessa blinked, stunned by his sudden backbone. He had never spoken to her like that over a staff member. Her eyes narrowed, calculating the risk. Direct warfare wouldn't work. Ethan was in protective mode. She needed to switch tactics. "Oh, baby, don't get me wrong," she cooed, her voice turning to sweet poison. "I'm just worried about the well-being of Noah, Liam, and Emma, and the image of this house. Imagine if an investor walked in right now." She spun toward Lucia and snapped her fingers a sharp, commanding sound. "You, stop standing there like a statue and clean this mess up. I want this room spotless in 10 minutes. Then get to the kitchen. I don't want to see you hovering while I eat with my fiancé." Lucia nodded frantically, diving for the cushions, her hands shaking so hard she nearly dropped them. "Yes, ma'am." "Right away, ma'am." The triplets, sensing the venom directed at their favorite person, started to panic. Noah slid off the couch with tears in his eyes and ran to Lucia, hugging her leg tight while she tried to fold a sheet. "Don't yell at Lulu," the little boy screamed, showing a bravery that shocked everyone. Vanessa recoiled like the child was radioactive. "My God, Ethan, look at this. She's turned your own kids against me. She's a manipulator." Ethan watched his son defending the nanny. He looked at Lucia, who was gently stroking the boy's hair to calm him, taking the abuse just to keep the peace. And something finally snapped inside him. The blindfold of social expectation fell off. "She is not going to the kitchen," Ethan said. His voice carried the absolute authority of a man who commanded thousands. Vanessa's jaw dropped. Lucia froze in place. "Excuse me?" Vanessa asked. "I said she isn't going anywhere," Ethan repeated, looking Vanessa dead in the eye. It's late. The kids are hungry. And Lucia has been working all day raising them while I traveled and you were... He glanced at the designer shopping bags Vanessa had dumped in the entryway at the spa. I assume I was prepping for our charity gala tomorrow. Vanessa huffed, indignant. Well, the gala is canceled, Ethan declared. Tonight we eat as a family. And that includes this person who actually makes my kids smile. Gertrude. He shouted toward the hallway. The housekeeper appeared instantly, pale as a ghost. Yes, sir. Set an extra plate at the main table. Lucia is dining with us. The silence that followed was deafening. Vanessa stared at Ethan with a mix of fury and disbelief, while Lucia looked at the floor, wishing the earth would swallow her whole. But eating at the main table broke every rule in the book. Ethan, this is ridiculous, Vanessa hissed. She's the help. She probably doesn't even know which fork to use. She's going to humiliate us. Then she'll learn. Ethan said, scooping Emma into his arms and marching toward the dining room without a backward glance. Or maybe we'll learn something from her. Let's go. Vanessa stood alone in the chaotic living room, digging her nails into her palms until it hurt. Her flawless face twisted into a mask of pure venom. This isn't over, you little maid, she muttered, glaring at Lucia's back as she followed Ethan. I'll make sure this is your last meal in this house. The Blackwood dining room was a cavernous hall designed to intimidate, not welcome. A massive mahogany table for 12 sat beneath a baccarat crystal chandelier that cost more than Lucia's entire college tuition. The walls were lined with stern oil portraits of ancestors who seemed to judge every breath you took. The tension was so thick you could cut it with a steak knife. Ethan sat at the head of the table. To his right, Vanessa sat stiff as an offended queen, downing her red wine in long, nervous gulps. On his left sat Lucia, perched on the edge of her chair like she was ready to bolt. She was still in her nanny uniform, a sharp contrast to the fine china and linen napkins. Across from them, the triplets sat in their high chairs. They banged their spoons against the table, oblivious to the Cold War raging above their heads. Hungry, hungry, Liam chanted. Gertrude marched in with the first course. Her movements were sharp and disapproving. She slammed Lucia's plate down just a little too hard. Lobster bisque. Lucia stared at the 3 different spoons in front of her, panic rising in her throat. She'd never seen so much silverware for one meal. Vanessa watched her like a hawk, smiling deeply. Go ahead. Dear, she said with fake sweetness, don't let it get cold. Or do they not have soup where you come from? Ethan slammed his water glass down. Vanessa, enough. I'm just trying to help. Ethan, she replied innocently. She looks so lost. It's almost cute, in a pathetic sort of way. Lucia swallowed hard. Her hands trembled. She was going to grab the wrong spoon. She knew it. She was about to humiliate herself and prove Vanessa right when she felt a tug on her sleeve. It was Emma, sitting in the high chair beside her. Lou, cut this, the little girl asked, pointing to a roll. Lucia smiled, grateful for the distraction. She forgot about the silver forks and turned to the child. With gentle, practiced hands, she cut the bread into bite-sized pieces. She blew softly on Emma's soup to cool it down and wiped a smudge from her cheek. Her movements were fluid and full of love. Forget etiquette. This was pure care. Here comes the airplane, Lucia whispered, guiding the spoon to Emma's mouth. The little girl opened up and ate happily. Ethan watched, mesmerized. He wasn't looking at the wrong spoon. He was looking at this connection. His kids, who usually screamed through formal dinners, were calm and content. He saw how Lucia, despite Vanessa's hostility and Gertrude's scorn, put the children's needs above her own comfort. Children need table manners. Ethan, Vanessa interrupted, hating that she was being ignored. Look at them. They're eating like animals. They should be learning proper etiquette, not getting coddled by the help. Vanessa reached over and snatched Liam's hand as he played with a roll. Stop that. Liam, sit up straight, she shrieked. Startled by her sharp tone and the long nails digging into his wrist, Liam reacted on instinct. He jerked his hand back hard, accidentally knocking over Vanessa's wine glass. The glass tipped. Red wine, dark as blood, splashed across Vanessa's pristine white silk dress. Time froze. Then Vanessa let out a scream that echoed all the way to the kitchen. She shot up, shoving her chair back violently. You little brat, she screamed, losing all composure. Look what you did. This dress is couture. Liam burst into tears, terrified by her rage. The boy sobbed. I didn't mean to. Ethan stood up, his face darkening like a storm. Vanessa, quit screaming at my son. But Vanessa was past reasoning. Wine stained her dress, and seeing Lucia just poured gasoline on the fire. It's her fault. Vanessa shrieked, stabbing a finger in Lucia's direction. She's ruining them. She lets them act like animals. Your kids are out of control, Ethan. And it is all because of this incompetent help. Before Ethan could say a word, Lucia stood up. The shaking stopped. Her usually soft eyes burned with a fierce fire. She had taken every insult thrown at her, but nobody went after her kids. You can say whatever you want about me, ma'am, Lucia said, her voice cutting right through Vanessa's screaming. Make fun of my clothes, mock where I come from, but don't you dare call these children useless. Liam is 3 years old. It was an accident. And if you spent 5 minutes getting to know them, instead of worrying about that dress, you'd know he didn't mean it. Dead silence filled the dining room. In the corner, Gertrude covered her mouth in shock. No one had ever spoken to Vanessa like that. Her jaw dropped, her face shifting from angry red to cold, pale fury. She glared at Ethan, expecting him to fire the insolent girl on the spot. Are you going to let her talk to me like that? Vanessa asked, voice shaking with rage. In your own house. A maid. Ethan looked at Vanessa, seeing only the stained dress and a face twisted with hate. Then he looked at Lucia, standing tall in her cheap uniform, hand resting on crying Liam's shoulder. The choice was easy. She's right. Vanessa, Ethan said coldly. It was an accident. Do not raise your voice at my children again. Vanessa felt like she'd just been slapped across the face. She stepped back, eyes filling with tears of frustration and shame. But not sad tears. These were the tears of a strategist who lost a battle but was planning to win the war. Fine, Vanessa said, forcing an unnatural calm. She brushed off her dress sharply. Very well. Ethan, I see where you stand. Enjoy your family dinner. She spun around and marched out, head high, her heels striking the floor like hammer blows. Passing Gertrude, she paused and whispered, so only the housekeeper could hear. Execute Plan B. That witch is gone tonight. Gertrude gave a tiny, barely visible nod. Vanessa left the room, leaving behind a trail of expensive perfume and a dark cloud of invisible danger. Ethan sighed and sat down. Looking at Lucia and the kids, he thought he'd disarmed the bomb. Unaware, he just started the timer on a much crueler trap. Lucia sat to calm Liam, but her hands started trembling again. She had a bad feeling, a cold dread settling in her bones. Women like Vanessa didn't lose. They just waited to strike back. And Lucia knew she was the easiest target. The storm had passed, or so she thought. After the tensest dinner of her life, the house fell into a cautious silence. Ethan went upstairs to tuck in the triplets, something so rare that the mansion walls seemed to hum with the shock of it. Lucia stayed downstairs in the massive marble kitchen, washing dishes, even though it wasn't her job. She just needed to keep her hands busy to stop the shaking. Running water and clinking china were the only sounds. Exhausted, yet strangely happy, she replayed how Ethan looked at her, how he defended her against that awful woman. For the first time, someone with power actually stood up for her. She smiled a little while drying a crystal glass. Maybe, just maybe, things were turning around. She didn't notice she wasn't alone. From the dark service hallway, 2 pairs of eyes watched her. Gertrude, arms crossed with a face like stone, and Vanessa, who had already swapped her stained dress for a champagne silk robe that cost more than Lucia made in a year. Now or never, Vanessa whispered, slipping a hand into her pocket. Her fingers touched the cold metal of her engagement ring, a 5-carat diamond, a Blackwood family heirloom Ethan gave her 6 months ago. The perfect bait. Make it quick, Gertrude muttered. The boss will be down any second. Gertrude marched into the kitchen. Lucia jumped, nearly dropping the glass. Gertrude, you scared me. Leave it, the housekeeper barked. Go to the 3rd floor linen closet. I need fresh towels for the guest bath. Miss Vanessa is upset and wants a relaxing bath. But isn't the linen closet usually... Don't argue with me. Girl, Gertrude snapped. Egyptian cotton towels are upstairs. Go now, and leave that filthy apron here. Can't have you dragging grease onto the main staircase carpet. Lucia, used to taking orders, just nodded. She untied the navy blue apron, her daily armor, and draped it over a high chair at the kitchen island. Right back, she murmured. Darting toward the service stairs, the kitchen went silent. That was all the time Vanessa needed. She slipped out of the shadows like a viper, moving with shocking speed for someone who always played the victim. She reached the chair. With a sleek, practiced motion, she pulled the massive diamond ring from her pocket and slid it into Lucia's apron. She shoved it deep, burying the gem in the folds of the cheap fabric. Done, she whispered, a triumphant smirk on her lips that never reached her cold, dead eyes. Get back to the living room. Gertrude urged, watching the door. I'll make sure she puts it on the second she's back. Vanessa nodded and vanished toward the main hall, heart pounding with the twisted thrill of the hunt. She was going to crush that little nobody. And she'd use Ethan's own morals to do it. 3 minutes later, Lucia hurried down, breathless, towels in her arms. Here, Gertrude. Fine. Leave them and put that apron back on. Still pots to scrub, Gertrude snapped, turning away to hide her nerves. Lucia sighed, exhausted, but did as told. She grabbed the apron and tied it around her waist, smoothing it down. She felt a hard lump in the right pocket. She frowned. Did she leave her keys in there? A coin? Maybe. She ignored it. Her mind was drifting to the kids and their father. Suddenly, the kitchen door swung open. Ethan walked in. Lucia tensed, but softened when she saw his relaxed expression. Jacket off, tie loose. He looked younger, more human. They're asleep, he said, genuine wonder in his voice. Read them 2 pages and they were out cold. Usually takes hours. Lucia smiled, forgetting Gertrude was fake organizing the pantry behind them. It's the blanket fort. Sir, they burned a lot of energy fighting dragons. Ethan stepped up to the island, only the marble counter between them. I wanted to thank you, Lucia, for dinner, for standing up for Liam. I know Vanessa can be difficult. She's your fiancé. Sir, I shouldn't have spoken out of turn, she replied. Looking down, you did the right thing, Ethan said firmly. He reached out, and for a split second, it looked like he might touch her hand resting on the marble. You opened my eyes today. Maybe we should rethink your role here. I think the kids need you as a governess, not a cleaner. Lucia's heart soared, staying close to the kids and him without scrubbing floors. Sir, that would be a dream. We'll talk details tomorrow, Ethan said, offering a tired, warm smile. Now go rest. It's been a long day. Lucia nodded, feeling like she was floating on air. She turned toward her small room in the service quarters. Everything was perfect. Too perfect. A blood-curdling scream shattered the quiet from the living room. No. Oh my God. No. Ethan's smile vanished instantly. Lucia froze. Vanessa. Ethan breathed, bolting toward the hall. Driven by fear, Lucia followed, unaware of the cursed ring bumping softly against her thigh in her apron pocket. The main hall was absolute chaos. Vanessa was on her knees by the fireplace, dumping her designer bag onto the rug. Makeup, credit cards, and her phone went flying. She was sobbing, hyperventilating with theatrical despair. Vanessa, what is it? Ethan rushed to her side, grabbing her shoulders to steady her. Are you hurt? My ring, she wailed, clutching his shirt like a lifeline. The engagement ring. Your grandmother's ring. It's gone. Ethan frowned, his logical mind trying to cut through the hysteria. Calm down. It has to be here. When did you last see it? I took it off. Vanessa screamed through her tears. I took it off after that brat stained my dress. I went to wash my hands. I left it right here on the coffee table. It was here 20 minutes ago. Ethan looked at the table. Empty. Are you sure? Maybe you left it in the bathroom. No. Ethan, I know where I put it. Vanessa pulled away, spinning around with wild eyes. Someone took it. That ring is worth $500,000. Someone stole it. Lucia stepped timidly into the living room, Gertrude trailing behind. That was all the trigger Vanessa needed. You? Vanessa yelled, her hand shaking with rage. You've been in here. Ethan stepped right between his fiancée and the nanny. Vanessa, stop. Nobody stole anything. Lucia was in the kitchen helping Gertrude. Oh, really? Vanessa spun around, fixing Gertrude with a predator's stare. Gertrude, was she with you the entire time? Gertrude, nailing her supporting role, hesitated. She looked at the floor, feigning discomfort. Well, not every second. Ma'am, I sent her upstairs for towels. But before that, Gertrude paused for dramatic effect. I saw her tidying up the cushions in here, right by that side table. The silence in the room became suffocating. Ethan turned slowly toward Lucia. Lucia, did you see a ring on the table while you were cleaning up? Lucia shook her head frantically, terror flooding her eyes. No, sir, I swear. I just straightened the sheets and pillows. I didn't see anything. I didn't take anything. She's lying. Vanessa screamed. Look at her. She's starving. She saw a ticket out of her misery and she took it. Ethan, check her pockets. That is enough. Ethan roared. I won't humiliate her like that. Lucia is honest. Honest? Vanessa let out a hysterical laugh. You barely know her. She's been here a month. If you don't have the guts to do it, I will. Vanessa lunged at Lucia. Lucia stumbled back against the wall. No, get off me, she cried, shielding herself. Vanessa. Ethan grabbed his fiancée's arm, holding her back. Stop it. If she has nothing to hide, Let her empty them. Vanessa challenged him, chest heaving, mascara running down her face. Do it, Ethan. If it's not there, I'll beg for forgiveness on my knees. But if that little thief has your grandmother's ring— Ethan looked at Lucia. He wanted to believe her. God knows he did. But the cold logic of his business world, where everyone has a price, started whispering in his ear. It was a small, expensive ring, easy to swipe, and he knew Lucia sent every dime of her paycheck back to her family. Lucia, he said, his voice soft but thick with tension. Please, just empty your apron pockets so we can end this and prove she's crazy. Lucia looked up at Ethan. She saw the doubt in his eyes, and it cut deeper than Vanessa's screaming. But she knew she was innocent. Yes, sir, she said with quiet dignity, though her chin trembled. She reached into her left pocket and pulled out a crumpled tissue and Emma's pacifier. She placed them on the table. Nothing, Ethan said, shooting Vanessa a reproachful look. The other one, Vanessa insisted. Relentless. Lucia slid her hand into the right pocket. Her fingers brushed against something hard and cold. Time stopped. The blood froze in her veins. It couldn't be. It wasn't possible. Her hand paralyzed inside the fabric. Her face drained of color, turning sheet white. Lucia, Ethan asked, his tone shifting. The protector was gone. The businessman was back. I didn't. Lucia stammered. Take it out, Vanessa ordered. Moving like a robot, Lucia pulled her hand out. In her open palm, glistening under the chandelier lights, sat the diamond and platinum engagement ring. Her world shattered. Ethan stared at the ring, then at Lucia. The disappointment on his face was devastating, like a door slamming shut in her face. That warmth and admiration he'd shown in the kitchen vanished instantly. It was replaced by arctic coldness, the look of a wealthy man confirming that everyone is out to rob him. I knew it, Vanessa screamed in triumph, snatching the ring from Lucia's hand. Thief, you miserable thief, after we fed you at our own table. No, Lucia cried, tears spilling over. Sir, no, I didn't put it there. I swear on my life, someone must have planted it. I'm not a thief. She tried to reach for Ethan, to grab his hand and beg, but he took a sharp step back, recoiling as if she were contagious. Don't touch me. His voice was so low and cold it was terrifying. Sir, please, you have to believe me, Lucia sobbed, falling to her knees. I love your children. I would never do this. Ethan looked down at her. He saw the tears. He saw the desperation. But the physical evidence was undeniable. The ring was in her pocket. I trusted you, Ethan said. And those 3 words hurt more than any insult. I left my kids with you. I let you into my life. And you're just like everyone else. Call the police. Ethan, Vanessa demanded. Have her locked up. Ethan closed his eyes for a moment, rubbing his temples. He looked like he had aged 10 years in 10 seconds. No, he finally said, his voice firm. I don't want a scene, and I'm not having police in this house scaring my children. He opened his eyes and looked down at Lucia, who was still kneeling and sobbing. Get out, he ordered the others. Sir, she whispered, pack your bags. Get out, right now, before I call the cops. But it's pouring outside. I have nowhere to go. Lucia pleaded. Not my problem, Ethan said, turning his back on her. Gertrude, watch her while she packs. Make sure she doesn't steal anything else. Then get her off my property. Vanessa smirked behind Ethan's back, absent-mindedly twisting the ring on her finger. Gertrude grabbed Lucia's arm hard and yanked her up. Let's go. Move it, the housekeeper hissed. Lucia glanced at Ethan one last time, just hoping he'd turn around, see the truth. But the Iceman was back. No pillow fort could save her now. She was dragged toward the back stairs. She wasn't crying about losing the job. She cried for the betrayal, for the 3 kids sleeping upstairs. Tomorrow they'd ask for her, never knowing their father kicked her out like a stray dog. Her room was tiny, a sterile white box she'd tried to make homey with family photos taped to the walls. Now, under Gertrude's hawk-like stare, she ripped them down, one by one. The sound of tape peeling off the wall felt deafening in the silence. Watch what you pack, Gertrude warned. She leaned against the doorframe, lips pursed in cruel satisfaction. I'm checking every inch before you leave. You aren't taking another silver spoon. Lucia didn't answer. She couldn't. The lump in her throat made it hard to even breathe. Her hands shook as she folded her few t-shirts, worn-out jeans, and the old wool sweater she slept in. She didn't have much. Her whole life fit into a gym bag with a busted zipper. At the bottom of the drawer, her fingers brushed cold rubber. The yellow gloves, the ones she used to build the fort, to make the kids laugh, to bring life to this dead house. Lucia picked them up. For a second, she wanted to keep them, a memory, but it hurt too much. She dropped them on the empty nightstand, a symbol of everything she built and everything that just collapsed. That's it. Lucia whispered. Zipping the bag, Gertrude stepped forward and ripped it open. She pawed through the clothes with disgust, digging through Lucia's humble underwear, hunting for stolen goods. Finding nothing, she huffed. Clean. Let's go. The boss wants you gone. Now. The walk to the back door felt like a funeral march. Through the kitchen, dark and empty. Lucia glanced down the hallway toward the main staircase. Upstairs, Noah, Liam, and Emma were asleep in their designer beds. They had no idea the only person who held them during nightmares was being thrown out like a criminal. Can I go say goodbye? Lucia stopped walking. Just a kiss. She knew the answer, but she had to ask. Are you crazy? Gertrude spat, shoving her toward the exit. You go near those kids. I'm calling the police. Get out. Gertrude threw open the heavy back door. Wind and rain slapped Lucia in the face. The storm was raging now. No Ubers, no buses. Not in this rich neighborhood. Miles from the city. Don't come back. Gertrude slammed the door. The deadbolt clicked. That was it. Lucia stood alone in the dark, soaked to the bone. Broken bag. Broken heart. She dragged herself toward the road. Tears mixed with rain. It wasn't the cold. It was the look in Ethan's eyes. Pure ice. Inside the study, Ethan poured his third whiskey. The burn didn't help. He couldn't shake the look in Lucia's eyes. She was a thief. It's Ethan. A voice came from the leather couch. Vanessa was lounging there, scrolling through her phone. Stop beating yourself up. You did what any good father would do. You protected your assets. Ethan turned around. He stared out the window at the sheets of rain. She didn't look like a thief when she played with them. He muttered. Grifters are the best actors. Honey. Vanessa stood up. She wrapped her arms around him from behind, resting her chin on his shoulder. Forget her. I'll call the agency in the morning. Get a pro, someone who knows their place. Ethan pulled away. Hard. Go to bed. Vanessa. Aren't you coming? I said go. Ethan was alone again. He downed the whiskey. He wanted to be right. The evidence was there. The ring was in her pocket. The logic was solid. So why did he have that sickening pit in his stomach? Because deep down, he knew he'd just made the biggest mistake of his life. Sunrise didn't bring clarity. It brought screaming. At 7 in the morning, the mansion didn't wake up to the smell of fresh coffee, but to the hysterical wailing of 3 toddlers. Ethan jerked awake on the study sofa, his heart pounding. He took the stairs 2 at a time, his head throbbing with a cocktail of hangover and guilt, only to find total anarchy in the nursery. The cribs were empty, and the triplets were on the floor, hammering against the bathroom door where Lucia used to bathe them. Lou! Lou! Noah screamed, his little face swollen and red. Gertrude tried to pick Emma up, but the girl twisted and kicked like she was being tortured. Let go. I want Lou. Sir, I can't stop them. The nanny gasped, clearly out of her depth. Ethan dropped to his knees. Hey, Daddy's here. He reached out to hug Liam, but the boy shoved him away. It was a weak push from a 3-year-old, but the rejection hit harder than a fist to the jaw. You bad, the boy sobbed. You made Lou go away. Ethan froze. How did they know? Lou just had to go to her house. Buddy, Ethan lied, feeling like garbage. She's visiting her mom. Liar, Emma shrieked. The witch yelled. You yelled. Just then, Vanessa swept into the room. She looked flawless in her silk robe, espresso in hand. For the love of God. What is this racket? My head is splitting. Shut them up. The 3 children spun around. For a split second, the room went silent, heavy with pure, childish hatred. Then Noah grabbed General Whiskers, his teddy bear, and launched it at Vanessa with everything he had. Bullseye. The bear slammed into the mug, splashing scalding coffee over Vanessa's hand. Ah! She shrieked, dropping the cup as it shattered on the floor. You little savage! Get out! The triplets screamed in unison. Go away. Witch. Ethan looked at his children, united in their rage. He looked at Vanessa, worried only about her ruined manicure, and then at the empty space where Lucia should have been. This house wasn't a home anymore. It was a war zone. And he realized he'd just court-martialed the only peacekeeper who held it together. 48 hours passed. 2 days that felt like 2 years. Blackwood Manor had turned into a sonic and emotional hellscape. The kids were on an undeclared but very effective hunger strike. They refused the food Gertrude cooked. They ignored the expensive toys Ethan panic-bought to buy their forgiveness. They wouldn't even leave their bedroom. They had barricaded themselves inside, building a sad little fort out of pillows. It was a pathetic imitation of the fortress of light Lucia used to build them. Ethan sat at the kitchen table, head buried in his hands. Dark circles bruised the skin under his eyes. He hadn't gone to the office. He hadn't answered a single investor call. His financial empire was humming along, but his actual world was burning to the ground. They have to eat. Ethan, Vanessa said, walking into the kitchen. The sweet act was gone. She was irritated, bored, and done pretending. If they won't eat, take them to a doctor, or better yet, a Swiss boarding school. They handle tantrums there. Ethan slowly lifted his head. His bloodshot eyes locked onto hers. Boarding school, he rasped. They are 3 years old. Vanessa, they just lost the only mother figure they've known since Elena died. And your solution is to ship them to another country. Vanessa rolled her eyes and poured herself a sparkling water. My solution is pragmatic. That girl brainwashed them. They need discipline, and you need rest. You look terrible because of that thief. Was she? Ethan asked. The doubt that had been gnawing at his gut finally spilled out. Vanessa tensed, barely visible. She set the glass down a little too carefully. What are you talking about? The ring was in her pocket. We all saw it. Don't start with the paranoia. It was too easy, Ethan muttered. Standing up, he started pacing the kitchen, the business shark in him waking up from its emotional coma. She knew you hated her. She knew Gertrude was watching. Why steal something so obvious and keep it in the dumbest place possible? Her apron pocket while she was still on the clock. Because she's stupid and greedy. Ethan, poor people do dumb things for money. Ethan stopped cold in front of the service door. He looked up at the corner of the ceiling, where a small black glass dome sat, invisible to most people. Gertrude said Lucia was in the kitchen the whole time, except when she went up for towels, Ethan said, thinking out loud. And you said the ring vanished from the living room. Exactly, Vanessa said, crossing her arms. She waited until I hit the bathroom. But she still had to cross the hallway to get from the kitchen to the stairs. Ethan spun toward Vanessa, a dangerous glimmer in his eyes. And 2 weeks ago, right after the neighbors got robbed, I overhauled the entire security system. Vanessa's face drained of color. I had high-definition cameras installed, and microphones rigged in every common area. The hallway, the kitchen, the living room. The silence was absolute, just the low hum of the refrigerator. Vanessa gulped visibly. Cameras in the living room, she squeaked. I thought you said no spying where we relax. I changed my mind. Ethan lied smoothly. He'd installed them to watch the staff, but now they were catching his fiancée. Without another word, Ethan stormed out of the kitchen and headed straight for the central server in his office. Vanessa froze, then scrambled after him. Ethan, wait. You don't have to do this. It's ridiculous. You trust a machine more than your future wife. Ethan stepped into his office, slammed the door in her face, and threw the deadbolt. He sat before the bank of monitors, typing his password with trembling hands. Show me the truth, he whispered. He pulled up the file from 2 nights ago. Camera 4, main hall. Camera 2, kitchen. Timelines synced. Play. On screen, Vanessa and Gertrude walked into the kitchen. Lucia stepped out to grab towels. Ethan fast-forwarded. Stop? There it was. On the right screen, Vanessa pulled something shiny from her robe. Zoom in. The ring. She approached Lucia's apron hanging on the chair. A twisted smirk curled her lips as she slipped the diamond into the pocket. Gertrude stood guard at the door. Ethan felt bile rise in his throat. He hit pause. He didn't need to see more. He didn't need to rewatch the public execution that followed. The proof was undeniable. He'd been sleeping with the enemy. He'd thrown the only innocent, kind soul in this house onto the street to protect a snake. He leaned back, burying his face in his hands. Guilt hit him like a tidal wave. He remembered Lucia's tears. He remembered her begging on her knees. Sir, you have to believe me. I love your children. And he'd called her a thief, kicked her out into the rain. The rage that followed was unlike anything he'd ever felt. This wasn't cold, corporate anger. It was volcanic, primal. He shot up so fast his chair crashed backward. He yanked the door open. Vanessa was pressed against the wood, eavesdropping. One look at Ethan's face sent her stumbling back in terror. She'd never seen a man look at her with such pure hate. Ethan, let me explain. It was a joke. We just wanted her out. Get out! Ethan's roar shook the mansion walls. Ethan, please. You have 5 minutes, he bellowed, stalking toward her as she tripped backward. You and your accomplice, Gertrude. The housekeeper appeared down the hall, pale as a ghost. I want you both out of my house. Now, if you're still here in 5 minutes, I swear to God I'm calling the cops with that tape. Attempted robbery, defamation, abuse. I will destroy you. Vanessa played her last card. Fake tears. But I love you. I did it for us. That girl was dangerous. Ethan grabbed her arm and dragged her toward the front entrance. Chivalry was dead. He threw the door open and shoved her onto the porch. You're the only danger here. Get lost. He slammed the door. Hard. He turned back to the massive, empty foyer. Silence returned. But it was different now. Not peaceful. devastating. He'd purged the house of evil, but the damage was done. He sprinted up to the servants' quarters. He burst in, empty, cold. On the nightstand sat her yellow rubber gloves. He picked them up. So small. They smelled faintly of lemon and dust. Ethan pressed them to his chest and, for the first time in 3 years, he wept. He cried for his late wife, for his kids, for the terrible injustice he'd done to Lucia. But tears wouldn't fix this. Ethan wiped his eyes furiously. He was a man of action. He'd made a mistake, and he was going to fix it. "Kids," he shouted, running toward the triplets' room. "Get dressed." He entered the room. 3 suspicious faces peered out from a pillow fort. "What?" Liam asked softly. "We're going to get her," Ethan said, grabbing his car keys. "We're going to find Lou." The transformation was instant. Pure hope lit up their sad little eyes. "Are we gonna get her?" Emma asked. "We're bringing her home," Ethan promised, hoisting Noah onto his hip and grabbing Liam's hand. "Even if I have to beg on my knees. Let's go." He was flying blind, armed only with an old address from a dusty personnel file. But being a Blackwood meant refusing to fail. He would find a needle in a haystack if that needle was the only thing that could save his family. The GPS in the black SUV announced their arrival, but looking out the window, Ethan felt like he'd landed on another planet. They had left the manicured lawns and gated mansions behind 20 minutes ago. Now, his German-engineered machine, built for the Autobahn, lurched awkwardly over deep craters on a forgotten dirt road. "Is this it, Dad?" Liam asked from the back, nose pressed against the tinted glass, his voice trembling with a fragile mix of hope and fear. Ethan gripped the steering wheel until his knuckles turned white. He scanned the area: bare brick houses, tin roofs rattling in the wind, and stray dogs snapping at the tires of his intruder vehicle. The poverty was raw and real, hitting Ethan in the face like a silent, screaming accusation. This was where she lived. The woman he'd accused of stealing a ring to get rich came back to this every night. After spending her days raising his children in a glass palace, acid shame burned a hole in his stomach. "Map says this is the place," Ethan replied, pulling up to a small house with faded blue paint, a rusty gate, and geraniums fighting to add color to the gray. "Lou," Emma shouted, struggling to unbuckle her seatbelt. "It's Lou's house." "Wait," Ethan ordered, turning to face them. His protective instincts flared as he spotted a group of young men on the corner, eyeing them with open hostility. A $100,000 car in this neighborhood didn't mean guests. It meant trouble cops, debt collectors, or evictions. "Stay in the car. Lock the doors. Don't open them for anyone until I say so." "But I want to see her," Noah protested, eyes swimming with tears. "You will. I promise. But let me talk to her first. I have to fix something I broke." Ethan stepped out into air that smelled of wet earth and wood smoke. His designer suit and Italian shoes felt ridiculous here, like a tasteless costume. And he could feel the neighbors' stares burning into his back. The looks were hard and defensive. He adjusted his jacket not out of arrogance, but nerves, and walked toward the rusty gate. There was no doorbell, so he rapped his knuckles against the metal sheet. The sound rang out dry and metallic. He waited 10 seconds, then 20. Nothing. He knocked harder. "Lucia." His voice sounded alien in the quiet street. Suddenly, the wooden front door flew open. It wasn't Lucia. A young man in his 20s stormed out, lean but wired, wearing a tank top and a look of barely contained fury. He had Lucia's honey-colored eyes, but while hers were warm, his were burning coals. Matteo, the brother Lucia sometimes mentioned to the kids. The kid marched to the gate aggressively, gripping the bars and glaring at Ethan with a contempt that would have made his business partners flinch. "What do you want?" Matteo spat, skipping the pleasantries. "I'm looking for Lucia," Ethan said, keeping his voice steady despite his racing heart. "I need to talk to her. She has nothing to say to you," the young man replied, fists tightening on the metal. "You already humiliated her, threw her out in the rain like trash. What else do you want? Come to accuse her of stealing something else. Missing a silver spoon." The words landed like punches. Ethan looked down for a second. Taking the hit, he deserved it. "No," Ethan said, locking eyes with him again. "I came to apologize. I made a mistake. A terrible mistake." Matteo let out a bitter laugh. "A mistake. My sister came home soaked, shaking, and crying. Not because she got fired, but because you, the big man, treated her like a criminal. She hasn't eaten in 2 days. She's leaving today, going back to our village. She's done with your money and your people." Panic seized Ethan. "She's leaving now. The bus leaves in an hour. She's packing right now. So get lost. Go back to your mansion and leave us alone. There's nothing for you here. Mateo turned to walk back to the house. I have the kids, Ethan shouted desperately. The young man stopped dead and turned slowly. What? Noah, Liam, and Emma. They're in the car. Ethan pointed to the SUV. They haven't eaten in 2 days. They won't sleep. They're just crying for her. They made me come. If she doesn't want to see me, I get it. But tell her the kids are here. Tell her they need her. Mateo stared at the luxury car. He saw 3 little heads pressed against the back window, 3 pale smudges in the dark-tinted glass. His hard expression cracked. He knew how much his sister loved those kids. They were all she ever talked about. It's gonna kill her to see them and then have to walk away, Mateo warned, his voice rough. She won't have to walk away, Ethan said intensely. Not if she doesn't want to. Please, just tell her to come out. Mateo hesitated for what felt like forever. Finally, he sighed in frustration and nodded at the house. Wait here. If she doesn't want to come out, you leave. Got it. Mateo went inside. Ethan stood alone at the gate, feeling more vulnerable than he ever had in his entire life. He looked at the car and gave a shaky thumbs up to the kids, trying to reassure them while he was trembling himself. 1 minute ticked by, then 2. Ethan started sweating cold. What if she refused? What if the damage was too deep to fix? He was used to fixing everything with a check, but he knew a check wouldn't fix this mess. Suddenly, the front door opened. Lucia appeared in the doorway. Ethan's heart stopped cold. She looked thinner, paler, with dark circles under her eyes, and her hair thrown up in a messy ponytail. She was wearing simple travel clothes and dragging that same broken suitcase she'd left his house with. When she saw Ethan at the gate, she froze. Her body went tight, like a bow ready to fire or flee. She was clutching a bus ticket in her hand. Seeing her like that hit Ethan with a sharp, physical pain in his chest. She was the picture of defeat. And he was the architect of that ruin. Lucia, he whispered, though she couldn't hear him from there. She walked slowly toward the gate like she was heading to the gallows. No hate in her eyes, just infinite sadness and exhaustion. Mateo walked beside her like a bodyguard. When she reached the gate, she didn't open it. She just stood there with the rusted bars between them, a cold, physical barrier between their 2 worlds. What are you doing here, Mr. Blackwood? She asked. Her voice was barely a whisper. Lucia, please, open the gate, Ethan begged, leaning close enough to smell the cheap soap on her clothes. I need to explain. I saw the video. Lucia's eyes went wide. What video? The security cameras. The ones I had installed 2 weeks ago. Ethan spoke fast, stumbling over his words, desperate to get the truth out. I saw everything. Lucia, I saw Vanessa. I saw her slip the ring into your pocket. I saw her planning it all with Gertrude. Lucia let go of her suitcase handle, covered her mouth with her hand, and her eyes instantly filled with tears. You know it wasn't me. I know for a fact, Ethan said, gripping the bars in desperation. I kicked them out. Vanessa and Gertrude are gone. They are never coming back. Lucia lowered her hand and let out a sob of pure, painful relief. The truth was out. Her name was clean. Thank God, she whispered. I just wanted you to know I'm not a thief. That was all that mattered to me. That you didn't think badly of me. I think you're the best person I've ever met, Ethan said, his voice intense. And I think I'm the biggest idiot in the world for doubting you for even a second. Lucia, please forgive me. She shook her head, wiping tears away with the back of her hand. It's okay, sir. I accept your apology. I'm glad it's cleared up. But now I have to go. My bus is leaving soon. Ethan froze. What? No. Lucia, you don't understand. I didn't come just to apologize. I came to take you home. To your home. Lucia took a step back, away from the gate. No, sir, that's not my home. You made it very clear I was just a disposable employee. I can't go back. No. The way you looked at me that night, it hurt more than the firing. I can't feel that way again. You won't be an employee, Ethan said quickly. You'll be whatever you want. The governess. The boss. I don't care. Just come back. It's not about money, she said firmly, lifting her chin with pride. I have my dignity. Ethan realized he was losing control. His money, his job offers, nothing was working. She was leaving. She grabbed her suitcase again. Goodbye, Mr. Blackwood. Take care of the kids. Give them a kiss for me. She turned around. No. The scream didn't come from Ethan. It came from the car. The sound of the electric locks unlocking cracked like a gunshot. The SUV's back door flew open and 3 small figures launched out like missiles, ignoring their dad's orders to stay put. Lou. The scream was unanimous, high-pitched, and heartbreaking. Lucia stopped dead. That voice, Those voices. Her body reacted before her mind could. She dropped the suitcase in the dust and spun around just in time to catch the avalanche. Noah, Liam, and Emma sprinted toward her on short legs, stumbling over potholes, arms wide and faces streaked with happy tears. They didn't care about the hood, the mud, or the staring neighbors. They just saw their Lou. Kids, watch out, someone yelled, but nobody stopped them. Lucia rushed the gate, forgetting her pride, her pain, and the fact she was leaving town. She shoved her hands through the rusty bars, desperate to reach them. My babies, my loves, she wept. Mateo watched the scene and sighed, defeated by the unstoppable force of nature that was those kids' loves. With a quick snap, he slid the bolt and threw the gate wide open. The wall came down. The triplets slammed into Lucia hard, knocking her to her knees in the dirt. Instantly, she was buried under a pile of hugs, sticky kisses, and little sobs. "Don't go," Emma cried, clinging to Lucia's neck like a lifeline. "The witch is gone." Dad kicked her out. "We missed you." "Lou," Liam mumbled, burying his face in her shoulder. "Don't leave us," Noah begged. Lucia held all three at once, smelling expensive shampoo and childhood, her tears mixing with theirs. "I'm not going. Baby. Shh. Don't cry. I'm here. Lou is here." She rubbed their backs, soothing them with that magic touch only she possessed. Ethan watched from a distance, a lump in his throat so big he couldn't swallow. Seeing his kids like this, so desperately happy, so whole again, confirmed what he already knew. Without her, this family didn't exist. Neighbors stepped onto porches, women in aprons, men in work clothes watching in silence. The hostility was gone. The scene was too pure, too human for judgment. They just saw the local girl being adored by three blonde kids dressed like princes. Ethan waited for the crying to settle, then walked forward slowly. His Italian loafers sank into the mud, but he didn't care. He approached the huddle on the ground. Lucia looked up. She had Emma in one arm, Noah in the other. Her eyes met Ethan's. The fear was gone. "Now, just a question." Ethan didn't say a word. Instead, he did something he had never done in his adult life, something his ex would never believe, something his business partners would call a fatal weakness. Right there in front of the whole block, in front of Mateo and his kids, Ethan Blackwood, the untouchable billionaire, dropped to his knees in the dirt, eye level with Lucia. He didn't give a damn about the $3,000 suit. He didn't care about his status. "Lucia," he said, his voice shaking, "I'm not asking you to work for me. I'm asking you to save us." Lucia stared, stunned. "Sir, please, get up. Your suit." "To hell with the suit," Ethan said, gently taking her hand, stained with mud and tears. "I've built skyscrapers, hotels, empires, but I don't know how to build a home. You do? You built one with old bed sheets right in the middle of my cold living room." The kids went still, eyes wide, watching their dad. They'd never seen him like this. "I was blind," he continued, squeezing her hand. "I let lies and appearances blind me. But these past 2 days without you, they've been the darkest of my life. Not just for the kids, for me, too." This house was empty, silent, dead. Ethan took a deep breath, swallowing the last shred of his pride. "I need you, Lucia. We need you. Not as an employee I can fire, but as part of this family, as the only person who knows how to love us for who we are. Please, don't get on that bus. Come home." Lucia looked at his hand holding hers, then into his blue eyes, now full of disarming vulnerability. She glanced at Mateo leaning against the doorframe. He nodded with a half smile, and she looked back down at the three hopeful pairs of eyes. "Dad says you're staying," Liam asked in a tiny voice. Lucia felt her heart burst. She knew going back meant facing a world that wasn't hers, the gossip, the social divide, but looking at this man kneeling in the mud, begging for a chance. She knew the game had changed. He wasn't the distant boss anymore. He was a man trying to be better. "Only if you promise me one thing," Lucia said, voice trembling but firm. "Anything," Ethan replied instantly. "No more dragons in the house, and if there are, we fight them together. Same team." Ethan smiled, a real smile that lit up his tired face. "I swear." "Together." Lucia let out a long breath and nodded. "Well, looks like I missed my bus." The kids went crazy. "Yes," they screamed, tackling Ethan and Lucia into the mud in a messy, chaotic group hug. For the first time ever, Ethan laughed out loud right there in the street, not caring who was watching, sitting in the dirt, his designer suit trashed, hugging the nanny and his kids. He felt richer than he ever did on Wall Street. Mateo walked over and grabbed Lucia's suitcase. "Guess you won't be needing this," he said, patting Ethan on the shoulder. A truce. Man to man. Thanks, Ethan said, meeting the brother's eyes. Thanks for hearing me out. He stood up and helped Lucia to her feet. She was covered in mud, hair a mess, tears on her face. And she was the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen. Let's go home, he said, taking her hand. He didn't let go, walking to the car. They weren't boss and employee. They were a family. A weird, wonderful, muddy family forged in the rain. But as they climbed in, Ethan knew there was one loose end. The happy ending was here. But the real change, that was just starting. Hit that subscribe button to see how this wraps up and catch the huge surprise he's got planned for Lucia. Something that changes her life, legally and forever. The drive back to this Blackwood estate felt like crossing between two different universes. As the luxury SUV ate up the asphalt, smoothing out the transition from potholes to manicured streets, the silence inside shifted. It wasn't awkward anymore. It was electric. A mix of relief, exhaustion, and unspoken promises hung in the air, smelling of expensive leather and wet earth. Lucia stared out the window, watching the city lights blur past like shooting stars. Noah was out cold on her lap, his little fist gripping her dirty shirt like his life depended on it. Like he was afraid she'd disappear if he let go. Liam and Emma were snoring in the back seats. Ethan drove with one hand, finally relaxed after years of tension. He kept glancing at the rearview mirror, not to check traffic, but just to make sure she was still there. Every time their eyes met in the glass, he gave her a small smile, subtle, but it said more than 1,000 business contracts. I'm ruining the car, Lucia whispered, looking at the mud on the cream interior. This leather costs a fortune. Ethan didn't even look at the seat. It's just a car. Lucia, things can be cleaned. What's inside? That's irreplaceable. The words hit her hard. She finally realized something deep inside him had shifted. The old Ethan, who loved money more than people, had died back there in the storm. At the massive iron gates, the night guard did a double take at the muddy vehicle and his disheveled boss. Ethan rolled down the window, opened the main gate. He ordered, "And tell the staff I want dinner in 20 minutes. In the kitchen, not the dining room." "The kitchen, sir?" the guard asked. Confused. "Yeah, and pizza. I want pizza." The guard nodded, stunned, and hit the button. They pulled up the gravel drive to the front entrance. Not the service door she'd been kicked out of 48 hours ago, but the main entrance, right under the grand chandelier. Ethan cut the engine and turned around. "We're home." Lucia shivered. It was her house. She could still feel the bad memories in the hallways. But when Ethan opened her door like a gentleman, helping her down with Noah, the fear evaporated. They walked into the foyer. Their footsteps echoed on the marble, but this time, it didn't feel lonely. It felt full. "Hot baths first, everyone," Ethan announced. He peeled off his ruined suit jacket and tossed it carelessly onto the fancy stair railing. Lucia stopped at the first step. "Yes, sir." Ethan frowned. "Rule number 1, don't call me sir. It's Ethan. Rule number 2, no more servants' quarters for you." She blinked, confused. "Then where do I sleep?" "Guest suite. Upstairs, right next to the kids." Ethan stepped closer, whispering so he wouldn't wake the boy. "I need you close. They need you here. And honestly, I need to know you're within reach." 2. Lucia flushed, the sudden color chasing the paleness from her cheeks. She nodded, too choked up to speak, and carried his most precious treasure up the stairs. The next hour was a blur of warm water, bubbles, and tired giggles. Ethan, the man who had never bathed his own kids, rolled up his sleeves and jumped in, clumsily trying to manage pajamas and detangle wet hair. There were no nannies to be found, just the two of them operating like a perfect team, anticipating each other's moves before they were even made. Whenever she handed him a towel, their fingers brushed, sending an electric shock through them that promised a future neither dared to talk about yet. Dinner happened in the kitchen, just like Ethan wanted. They sat on high stools, eating pizza straight out of the box. With full bellies and calm hearts, the kids crashed out fast. Once the house fell quiet, Ethan and Lucia were left alone in the kitchen's soft glow. The dim light from the range hood made the space feel incredibly intimate. Lucia nervously twisted the edge of a napkin. The crisis had passed, but now the reality of it all was sinking in. "I have something for you," Ethan said, breaking the silence. He stood up and stepped out for a moment, leaving Lucia with a knot of anxiety in her stomach. A contract. New rules. He came back with a thick manila envelope and a small velvet box. He slid both onto the marble island between them. "It's not what you think," he said, catching the fear in her eyes. "Open it." The envelope first. Her hands shook as she pulled out the documents. They were legal papers on his firm's letterhead. She read the title and gasped. Emergency shared legal guardianship, she read, confused. Ethan, this is for a wife, or family. It's for the person I trust most in this world, he said, leaning his elbows on the counter, his gaze locking onto hers. I fired my legal team over the phone today to get this drafted immediately. If anything happens to me, if I lose a fight, I won't let my kids be shipped off to boarding school or to distant relatives who only care about my payout. I want them with you, because you are their mother in every way that actually matters. Tears spilled from Lucia's eyes. It was the deepest declaration of respect and trust anyone had ever given her. He wasn't just giving her a job. He was handing her the keys to his entire life. I don't know what to say. I don't have money or a degree. You have the one thing money can't buy. Lucia, you have a pure heart. That's worth more than my whole empire. Ethan gently pushed the velvet box toward her. And this isn't an engagement ring. Not yet. That would be too much. Too soon. She opened the box. No diamond inside, just a key. An old, iron skeleton key that looked like it opened a fairy tale door. Master key, he explained. Opens everything. Library, wine cellar, office, safe. It means no secrets, no forbidden zones. This is your home now, Lucia. All of it. You don't work for me anymore. You live with me. We build this together. She held the key, feeling its cold, heavy reality in her palm. She looked up and finally saw the man behind the myth. The father trying to be better. The partner. I accept, she whispered. Ethan walked around the island and stopped right in front of her. The tension that had been building since their hands touched over the laundry finally snapped. Thank you for coming back, he murmured, reaching out to cup her cheek. His thumb brushed away a stray tear. Thank you for coming to get me, she whispered, leaning into his touch. Ethan leaned in. It started as a tentative kiss, a question asked in the dark, but when Lucia answered, clutching his shirt, it shifted. It turned passionate, desperate, making up for years of lost time in a single heartbeat. It was the kiss of a survivor finding the shore, a seal on a contract made of skin and soul, not ink and paper. Epilogue. 1 year later, snow drifted softly over the Blackwood estate, turning the gardens white. But inside, it was warm as summer. The main living room, once a cold minimalist museum, was unrecognizable. In the center, right where the untouchable glass table used to be, stood a magnificent, permanent fort, not just a pile of sagging sheets. It was a structure it was a masterpiece of polished wood and colorful fabrics, custom built by pros but dreamed up by 3 kids. The fort boasted turrets, pillow drawbridges, and flags flying the family crest. General Whiskers, a teddy bear clutching a serious briefcase, stood guard as laughter spilled from inside. King Daddy is trapped, Liam shouted, crawling out of a fabric tunnel. Queen Mommy has to save him, Emma yelled, sprinting toward the kitchen. Lucia stepped out, wiping her hands on a dish towel. The uniform was gone. She wore a soft cream cashmere sweater and comfy jeans, and a ring finally sparkled on her finger. Not the gaudy, cursed heirloom from the grandmother, but a fresh start. It was a custom piece. Ethan designed a golden sapphire matching Lucia's eyes, flanked by 3 diamond sparks for the children. Is the king in trouble again? Lucia teased, faking a sigh through a radiant smile. That man is a magnet for mess. She walked into the living room and peeked inside the fort. Ethan lay buried under a mountain of pillows, pretending to be tied up with a rainbow jump rope. He was still in his suit, tie gone, rocking argyle socks. He winked. Help, my queen. The tickle dragons got me, he declared theatrically. Only a true love's kiss can break the spell. Kiss him, the triplets chanted. Lucia crawled into the fort, just like she did that first day. But this time, she wasn't afraid of getting fired. She owned the castle. She leaned in, brushing a strand of gray hair from her husband's temple. I'll save you, my king, she whispered. But it's gonna cost you. Oh yeah, Ethan grinned, wrapping his arms around her. What's the price? Pizza for dinner, and you're doing the dishes. Ethan laughed loud and hard, a sound of pure joy that chased away the last ghosts of the past. It's a deal. Lucia kissed him, and the kids tackled them in a massive hug, bringing down a fabric wall. No one panicked. No one shouted. They knew that no matter how many times the fort fell, they had a lifetime to build it back up. The camera pulls back, drifting out the window into the snowy night. The mansion glows against the dark, not as a monument to wealth, but as a beacon of home. The end.